I used to want to be right, and then I realized that was antithetical to what I actually wanted. This can apply to conversations that you're having with people, this can apply to relationships. When I had this realization, actually, I was doing a lot of activism work. This was towards the end of college slash graduation around that time. So I want to talk about what I actually want and what you might actually want, because I didn't think that I was trying to be right. That's not how I thought about it at the time. I really thought that I was just like fighting the good fight. And I really believed in, still 100% believe in what I was really fighting for in my activism work. And there was a day, I remember this, I was at a protest that I had helped organize. It was one of those protests where it was like we were on one side of the street and the people who are opposing us were on the other side of the street. And I had this moment because I knew that we were never going to convince these people that we were right. That was never going to happen. We're never going to convince them that we were right. They were certainly never going to convince me that they were right. And I had this moment at this protest that was like, if we're never going to convince them and they're never going to convince me, then what are we actually doing here? And I was just like, so we think that we're right. They think that they're right. So, how do we ever solve anything? How does that even work? And what I realized is that I wasn't interested necessarily in being right, but then that begged the question of what is it that I actually want? And also realizing that it didn't really matter what I wanted either, because it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what I want. Like, they don't care what I want. And I don't necessarily care what they want either. Like, we are at odds. And I was just like, how are we ever going to come to any solution if both of us are in this position of, I'm never going to agree with you and I'm always going to fight you? And so, what that showed me was that it was the fight that was causing the division, right? Like me being right, or my side, I wasn't a one woman protest, but my side being right and their side being right was never going to solve anything. And so if it's not about being right, then what is it about? Like, how can we live in harmony? How can we progress forward? What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? What can we actually do? Because if we're always right, then there's always a wrong. And so if we're always right, then that means that we are always causing a division. Not to put fault or blame on it, but just to show the cause and effect. If you're right, that means there's a wrong. So if you're right, that means you're causing division. So inside of this mental experiment that I had for years, I'm 35 now, and that was in my early 20s. But this became a really important inquiry in my life. And right after that, or very shortly after that, I started working with a domestic violence center, leading trainings, lectures, and talks around what is domestic violence, how can we be aware, stay educated, help people in these situations, etc. And one of the first answers that I got in working at the domestic violence center is how much knowledge is really powerful. I remember one of the trainings that I gave was around LGBTQ plus people. And the domestic violence center that I was working with was in Kansas. And a lot of the volunteers that I was training were obviously from this small town. And it was a lot of older white women, mostly. And talking to them about how to help people in the queer community. And I remember after one of the talks, this woman came up to me and she was like, I have a son who is about 40 years old and he came out as gay years ago, and I have never truly understood him until today. And I just want you to know that you've given me access to really loving my son and understanding my son. And like, that was a huge light bulb moment for me in how much education can help in bridging these gaps, like education and awareness in bridging these gaps. However, it still begs the question, like, there's still these larger problems and issues. And of course, like, education and awareness is really important, and it is really helpful. And you can see over the course of time how helpful it has been to continue to raise awareness and educate people on different things. Obviously, for me, it's LGBTQIA plus things as a queer person, as someone who has worked and helped that community for over a decade now. That's part of my area of expertise in this. But that was like the next part of that, like, well, if we're not being right, like, if you're not being right about something, if you're not fighting, if you can lay down your sword and open a conversation, then that would make a really big difference. And of course, like, I'm not naive enough to think that everyone is ready and willing and able to do that. But for the people that are, that's really important. However, it does leave this other question of, okay, but people still are fighting. And regardless of whether or not I'm putting my weapons down, has the other side put their weapons down, which is still a part of it. And the other concept that I want to introduce here as well is inside of how you present information, because a principle that I have lived by since I was 19 is it's important to have said it. That's the mantra. It's important to have said it. And what I mean by that is that when you feel something authentically, when there's something that's really true for you, true about you, true in your experience, true in how you see the world, it's important to have said it, have said the thing to whoever it is. And the other part of this is that it's important to have said it with lasting integrity. What I mean by lasting integrity is the way that you say it and who you're being when you say it. So I've always been a part of marginalized communities, but I've always been very passing inside of those communities. So for example, I grew up in the Bible Belt and I'm not a Christian and I don't believe in God. I don't believe in like a God. I don't necessarily claim the term atheist anymore. That doesn't necessarily ring true for me, but for a really long time, that was the term that I knew, that was a term that I used, that was a term that resonated with me. And being an atheist in the Bible Belt can be really scary, but it is one of those things where if someone looks at you, they're not going to know that you're an atheist. So if you're having a confrontational conversation, it's because you have said something, you have brought it up, or you've answered a question in a way that is like, oh, it's clear that like you don't believe in God or something like that. And I was willing and open to be open about that and have those conversations with people. And that brought on a lot of anywhere between interesting to mean to threatening conversations with people. And I was between anywhere between 14 to 19, right? When I really got this like, oh, saying it with lasting integrity is that how you are being and how you say that thing is going to make a lasting difference for that person. If you are mean, if you are spiteful, if you are angry, if you are threatening, then now you are part of the stigma of the angry atheist, right? And so people have an easier time brushing that off, being like, yeah, all atheists are just angry and mean and upset and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And yeah, I talked to this girl the other day and she was the exact same way and blah, 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 blah. And it's so much easier to blow me off. Not because what I'm saying isn't true for me, but because of how I'm saying it, because of who I am being when I say it. But if I am calm, if I am direct, if I am open, if I say things that are just true for me, if I don't pick a fight, if I don't fall into the trap of a fight, if I am polite, if I am kind, then when I say what I say, and they say whatever they say about it, and then I am unaffected by whatever it is that they have to say, whatever nasty thing they have to say to me, whatever snarky thing they have to say to me, whatever, or even if it's a great thing that, you know, they're being great with me too, but we just disagree, and that's totally fine. But I get to say who I am being about it, and that has a lasting effect because now people have had a conversation, and in this case, it's with an atheist. Now some people have had a conversation with an atheist who is open, welcoming, has integrity. And so they will be able to remember, maybe they won't remember exactly what I said, but now they have a counter to that stigma. And maybe even years down the road, they'll come back and revisit that conversation with me. Or maybe even years down the road, they'll come back and apologize. Both of those things have happened to me. 100%, both of those things have happened to me about being an atheist, about being a feminist, about being liberal, about being queer, about being polyamorous. Like I said, all of my identities are like very passing, right? And I have a lot of privilege in looking the way that I do and presenting the way that I do, that people don't assume a lot about who I am or my identity. And I have chosen to be really out about who I am and my identity and all of these things because for me, that's really important, right? This is not a judgment or value statement on anyone else or what you should or shouldn't do with your life. But for me, it has always been really important for me to be out about who I am and what I believe. Because I feel like, for me, I feel like it has integrity for not just myself, but what I want to see in the world. I want acceptance, right? And that goes back to the what do I want, but does it even matter? But what I want is acceptance. That's what I want. I want acceptance. I want us to be able to accept each other and not trample on each other. There's a difference between accepting who someone is, but then taking away their rights. Like that doesn't work, right? I want acceptance. I want kindness. I want respect. I want us to be able to coexist, right? And I feel that saying the thing, saying whatever it is, saying it with lasting integrity, not being right about it, like letting go of being right. And trust me, that is really hard for me to do. Anybody who knows me knows how stubborn I am. And so it is very difficult for me to not be right about things and to come from that space of like coexistence. It is extremely difficult for me to do that. And I try to do it and I do it to the best of my ability. And I learn inside of this inquiry because it's really important to me, because I see how valuable that is, because I have seen in the course of my life with real experiences with me and also with people that I know, with people that I have coached, with people that I have worked with, that this is real, like that it actually does work. The other thing that I want to put in here as well inside of this idea of not being right, like I don't have to be right. I've been talking about it more from a societal level. And what I said at the beginning of the video is that it could also have to do with your relationships as well. For those of you who don't know, I'm a relationship coach. I help queer and or polyamorous people in their relationships. And one of the things that I see that really gets in the way of connection in relationships, of being able to understand one another, of coming together, of actually finding solutions for problems, of seeing things past difficult situations. Like, if you are committed to being right about something, that relationship has a very low probability that you are going to see it through challenging times. And every single relationship is going to have challenging times in one way, shape, or form, right? So if you're committed to being right about something and you are creating division in your relationship, and if you create division in your relationship, then you're going to divide. Like, that's just how that works. I think what people hear, especially in relationships and definitely on a societal level, but what people hear inside of letting go of being right is that you have to concede to the other side. And I hope that you've gotten over the course of this video from subtext, maybe you haven't, is that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you give up being right, so now therefore you are wrong. No, that's getting caught in a dichotomy. What I'm saying is letting go of being right to dissolve this dichotomy of the right and wrong here. And I'm not saying that things aren't happening. This is the second thing that comes up inside of that, is people are like, but there are things that are wrong. Okay, I can work with that. There are things that are not working, but there are things that are not working for you. The other person or people are doing that thing because it's working for them, which is one of the reasons why, like, the right and wrong doesn't work, because they're like, no, I am right, and you're like, no, you are wrong. Again, that causes that division. It's like a magnet on the opposite side. Like, it's not ever going to connect. It's never going to connect. And so when we look at, okay, what's working versus what's not working, then we have the opportunity to get curious. We have the opportunity to be like, why is this working for me and not working for them? Why is whatever this is over here working for them but not working for me? Because when you start to break down the nuances of things, especially in interpersonal relationships, because in interpersonal relationships, you most likely have some sort of commitment to at least try to get along and to see through challenge. On a more societal level, sometimes there's less incentive depending on what the groups are that we're talking about. But on an interpersonal level, there's a lot more incentive to really get more nuanced and get more curious. Like, okay, why is this working for you? Like, I'm saying that this doesn't work for me, but you keep doing X. Like, why do you keep doing that? Like, why does this actually work for you? What's your goal? What's your ultimate outcome here? And in interpersonal relationships, most of the time people want the same thing. It's just that how we're getting there is not working for us, right? That also works on a societal level to an extent as well. A lot of the time, most of us want the same thing. Mostly groups want the same thing. Most people in the world really just want to have, their needs met and to have good relationships and to do the things that they love. Like, that's most of us, right? We just have a different idea of how the world should look in order for us to do that, right? Like, being able to start to break down these things, and it does get complicated. And this is the other hard thing about letting go of being right. Being right is the easy choice. Being right and making other people wrong is easier than looking at the nuance of why you feel the way that you do and why they feel the way that they do. That is so much harder to do than being right and being wrong. And I'm not, again, no shame and no blame. Like I said, this is one of the reasons why I have a hard time not being right about things, because it's easier. It's so much easier to just be right about things. But that's not productive. It doesn't work. It does not work to just be right about things. And so we have to have this question. We have to have this question of what is going to work? What is going to work in the best way? Or just what is going to work for now? What's the bridge that's going to get us to the next island so that we can deal with the next bridge after that? We don't have to solve all the world's problems right now, and we're not going to. So, what is the next bridge that we can cross to get to a place where we agree, where things are working for people just a little bit better than they were on this island? And then we'll talk about what the next island is after that. And you can do this with yourself, you can do this with relationships, you can do this on a societal or community level, right? Because if you are in communities, a community could be family, community could be friends, community could be your church, community could be organizations that you're involved with. This is also something to start to work on at that level. If you are not good at this skill, then you might want to start with yourself and interpersonal relationships and then start to work that out and then start to see how those patterns can help or impact the next level up, which maybe that for you, that's your friend group. Maybe that for you, that's your family. Maybe for you, that's the yoga studio that you go to all the time or that you're super invested in or whatever. When we let go of being right, this whole other world can open up. And you might experience some resistance to that at first because it's very uncertain. But my offer to you is to consider that you can look through the lens of what's working for me and not working for me, and what is my ideal outcome here. What's working for them and not working for them, and what's their ideal outcome. And it is best to ask them. And is there any overlap? Is there a way in which we can collaborate together? Is there a way in which we can coexist? And this might take multiple conversations, especially on a societal level. This type of conversation, if it's had, can take decades to come to fruition. Which is why it's like, okay, what can work for now? All right, what's the next step? Because I think the other pitfall in wanting to just be right about things is then if you're right, then you have a right solution that we could just do right now. If only you could see it my way, then we could just do this. It's so seducing. It's so seducing. Being right is so seducing. Because it's like, oh, see, I have the answer and I have the solution. If you just listen to me, then da-da-da. But then we wouldn't have this amazing opportunity to learn how to have difficult conversations. Oh man, that I said that mostly sarcastically, but in all seriousness, actually, when we are able to have difficult conversations, we really can create more connection in our relationships and in our communities. Like when you have the skill, have the art of having difficult conversations and you're able to lean inside of that and you're able to grow inside of that and you're able to be with the uncomfortability and the challenge to see it through to the other side like you would a really hard workout, right? Then you have this superpower of being able to actually have you be more connected to people, to have others be more connected. Like you really do have a superpower because this is life. We're always going to have challenge. We're never going to agree on everything. And that's the other part about letting go of being right or wrong. When you start to really think about it and you start to dive more into this inquiry, what you realize is that right and wrong were an illusion in the first place. That right and wrong mostly don't exist. There really is like what's working and what's not working. And we can have a conversation about morality later. And just from a relational, conversational, like working through difficulties point of view, the farther that you go into this, the easier it is to start to have artistry with this difficult conversation, right? Or difficult conversations or difficult times that you're having. You start to be more resourceful inside of it. You start to gain more confidence in yourself. You start to gain more tools. So inside of leaning into giving up, I'm right, you're wrong, and opening that up and leaning into what's working, what's not working, what do we actually want here, and hearing each other. And when we actually start to lean into that conflict, then the rightness and the wrongness are easier to set aside, and we are able to gain that skill and tools and knowledge in order to move forward with one another. And that is not something that we are taught, which is why, and I'm gonna drop my course here, but that is why myself and Ro Moed created the How to Have Difficult Conversations program, so that we could teach people these skills that we're not taught. Like, you were not taught this. You might have witnessed some of it, you might have picked some things up along the way, but you probably didn't take a course on how to have challenging conversations in your queer or polyamorous relationships, or polycule, or like how to have conversations with your community about your identity or what's going on in the world. Like, we're not taught how to do these things, and so we don't do them well. And that's also part of the problem too, is that we don't know and we don't do it well, or we are coming from this very charged, I'm right, you're wrong, and then we're causing division. And that's not conducive to finding a solution. And I am absolutely 100% convicted that we really can make things better for ourselves, for our communities, for the world at large. I am holding these possibilities. We've done it before, we can do it again. And each time we get to iterate and we get to get better at these things. I believe that. I 100% wholeheartedly, and maybe even foolhardily, and I don't care, believe that. If you want to learn more about having these conversations, I would love to offer you the first module of our course for free. And if you go to the link below this video, you can register for free for the first module. And if it's something that really resonates with you, then you can join our program. I would love to have you in there, and we'll have a conversation about that. That would be wonderful. All right, lovely, amazing humans. I appreciate you. If you clicked on this video and you've gotten this far, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your commitment to having difficult conversations, to sticking through things, to looking at yourself in ways that aren't comfortable either, so that you can get better, so that you can seek other possibilities, so that you can open up other doors, turn over other rocks. If you're watching this video and you've gotten this far, you're someone who does believe in possibilities and who does believe in something bigger for themselves and for other people. And I really appreciate you for doing that. And I really encourage you to continue to do that. And like I said, if that is also in working with myself and my colleague Ro, then I would absolutely adore that too. All right. Thanks, loves. Mwah. See you in the next video.